The crystal chandelier above the mahogany table cast fractured light across 12 faces, but only one voice cut through the silence like a blade dipped in venom. "You know what you are, Daniel." Margaret's perfectly manicured finger pointed across the roasted duck. "You're poor trash who got lucky." My wife's hand found mine under the table, trembling. I squeezed back and smiled, the kind of smile that comes when you've been holding a royal flush for 6 months and your opponent just went all in. I met Claire 3 years ago at a community art exhibit in Portland, where she stood before a watercolor of Mount Hood with her head tilted just so. She wore paint-stained jeans and a sweater 2 sizes too big, and when she laughed at my terrible joke about perspective, I felt something click into place. She was warm where I expected cold, genuine where I'd found pretense. We were engaged within a year. Margaret Whitmore made her opinion clear the first time we met. She lived in a renovated Victorian in the West Hills, all restored hardwood and imported tile, and she received us in her sunroom like a queen granting audience. "So you work in, what was it, property management?" She'd said it the way someone might say sewage treatment, her lips barely moving. "Real estate investment," I'd corrected gently. "I buy distressed properties, renovate them, and flip or rent." "How industrious." The word dripped condescension. "Claire's father was a cardiologist, you understand. We're accustomed to a certain standard." Claire's father had passed when she was 19, a detail Margaret wielded like a shield against any criticism, as if grief granted her immunity from basic decency. She'd never remarried, pouring all her energy into maintaining appearances and managing the modest trust he'd left. The West Hills house was her crown jewel, but I'd done my homework. The property taxes were bleeding her dry, and she'd taken a reverse mortgage 3 years prior. Over the following months, Margaret's barbs became routine. At Claire's birthday dinner, she'd loudly wondered if I could afford something nicer than Olive Garden. When we announced our engagement at a bistro I'd specifically chosen for its sentimental value, it was where we'd had our third date. At the engagement party she hosted, she'd seated me at the children's table by accident. When we shopped for wedding venues, she'd actually gasped at our choice of a restored barn. A barn, my daughter married in a barn like some frontier settler. Claire would apologize in the car afterward, her voice small. "She doesn't mean it, she's just protective." "She means every word," I'd say, keeping my voice light. "But it's okay, I can handle it." What Claire didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd grown up in East Portland in a neighborhood where sirens were the nightly soundtrack. My mother cleaned houses, my father drove delivery trucks, and I'd put myself through community college before transferring to Portland State. I'd worked construction summers, learned the bones of houses before I learned their market value. I'd scraped and saved and risked everything on my first property, a foreclosed duplex in Beaverton that everyone said was a teardown. I'd proved them wrong, then I'd done it again and again. By the time I met Claire, I had a portfolio of 17 properties and a net worth that would have made Margaret choke on her Chardonnay. But I drove a 10-year-old truck because it was reliable. I wore jeans and flannel because they were comfortable. I didn't believe in flashing money. I'd seen what that did to people, how it curdled relationships and bred resentment. So I'd kept quiet, even when Margaret's insults landed like stones, even when she'd forgotten to include me in the family holiday card. Even when she told Claire loudly enough for me to hear that it's not too late to reconsider a week before the wedding. The wedding itself was beautiful despite her, or perhaps because we'd stopped seeking her approval. We'd married in that barn, strung with market lights and wild roses, and Claire had looked like something out of a dream. Margaret had worn black. 6 months into our marriage, I'd been browsing commercial real estate listings out of habit when I'd seen it, the Thornwood estate. 12,000 square feet of Gothic revival architecture perched on 3 acres of prime West Hills land, with original stained glass, a widow's walk, and gardens that tumbled down the hillside like something from a fairy tale. The listing price was astronomical, but the property had been in probate limbo for 18 months. The heirs were scattered and desperate. I'd known the house the moment I saw the photos. Margaret had dragged us past it twice, slowing her Mercedes to a crawl each time. "That's a real house," she'd sighed. "That's what success looks like. The Thornwoods built a legacy, not like these new money tech people in their glass boxes." She'd made inquiries, Claire told me later. Margaret had actually contacted the estate attorney, dreaming of somehow, impossibly, acquiring it. The price alone would have required her to sell everything she owned twice over. I'd bought it 3 weeks later in a private sale, paying cash, and held the deed under my LLC. Nobody knew. The property needed work: a new roof, updated electrical, refinished floors, and I'd spent the next 5 months personally overseeing every detail. I'd installed a commercial kitchen because I knew Margaret loved to cook. I'd restored the library because Claire had mentioned her father once dreamed of having one. I'd had the gardens professionally landscaped, every hedge and rose bed returned to historical accuracy. And I'd waited. The dinner invitation had come from Margaret herself, formal cardstock with calligraphy, an intimate family gathering to celebrate Thanksgiving. Intimate meant Margaret's sister Judith, her husband Robert, their 3 grown children plus spouses, and Margaret's childhood friend Constance, who'd married into old Portland money and never let anyone forget it. Claire had been nervous all morning, changing outfits 3 times. Maybe we should bring wine, something expensive. We'll bring ourselves, I'd said, kissing her forehead. That's enough. It wasn't, of course, it never was. Margaret's dining room was a stage and she'd set it for maximum impact. The table could seat 16 and she'd placed us, me specifically, at the far end, nearest the kitchen door, where staff would sit if she employed any. Claire was 6 seats away, between her cousin Jennifer and Aunt Judith. I was flanked by Jennifer's husband Todd, who worked in finance and spent 20 minutes explaining cryptocurrency while barely pausing for breath, and an empty chair presumably reserved for late-arriving cousin Marcus. The meal began with Margaret at the head of the table, presiding like a magistrate. She wore emerald silk and enough jewelry to fund a small nation, her silver hair arranged in an elaborate twist. Constance, beside her, matched the performance in sapphire and pearls. "Daniel," Margaret began as the first course arrived, a butternut squash soup with truffle oil that probably cost more per bowl than my first week's groceries as a college student. "Claire mentioned you've been quite busy with your little projects, still flipping those houses in the outer neighborhoods." The table quieted. Claire's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "I stay busy," I said evenly. "Just closed on a property in Northwest, actually. Great Bones, original craftsman details." "Northwest," Constance repeated as if I'd said the moon. "Isn't that where all the homeless camps are now?" "How frightfully urban," Todd laughed, a bark of sound. "Man, I couldn't do what you do. All that risk, working with contractors who probably don't speak English, tenants who trash the place. I'll stick with index funds." "Someone has to provide housing," I said mildly. Margaret's smile was a knife edge. "Yes, how noble, though I suppose when one comes from humble beginnings one has a certain comfort with that world." Judith, to her credit, looked uncomfortable. "Margaret, the soup is wonderful. Is this the same recipe from last year?" But Margaret wasn't finished. As the soup bowls were cleared and the main course appeared, herb-crusted duck with fingerling potatoes and haricots verts arranged like a still life, she turned her attention back to me with the focus of a hunting bird. "Claire was accepted to that curator position at the Portland Art Museum," she announced. "Of course, she can't accept it. The salary is barely $40,000, and with Daniel's situation, they simply can't afford for her to take a passion job." My wife's face flushed crimson. "Mom, we talked about this. I'm not interested in that position right now. I'm happy at the gallery." "You're stagnating," Margaret said flatly. "You have a master's degree in art history and you're working retail." "But I understand sacrifices must be made when one marries for love rather than security." The words hung in the candlelit air. Robert cleared his throat. Jennifer studied her plate with sudden intensity. "Claire is an incredible curator," I said, keeping my voice level. "And she makes her own choices about her career. I support whatever she decides." "How magnanimous," Constance murmured. "Though support doesn't pay the bills, does it? I told Margaret when you two announced the engagement, love is lovely, but breeding and background matter. One can always tell." "Tell what exactly?" Claire's voice was tight, her knuckles white around her fork. "Quality," Constance said simply. "It shows in everything, how one dresses, where one lives, how one conducts oneself. Your father understood that, Claire. He came from the right sort of family, attended the right schools. He built a practice that meant something. He also believed in kindness," Claire shot back, "in judging people by their character." "Character," Margaret scoffed. "Is that what you call someone who drives a truck held together by rust and hope? Who wears the same jacket to every family function? Darling, I love you, but you've settled, and settling is a slow poison." The table had gone utterly silent now, even Todd's crypto monologue forgotten. Marcus had arrived during the exchange and stood frozen in the doorway, reading the room. I set down my fork with care. Something in my chest was unwinding, a coil of patience finally reaching its end. You know, Margaret, you're absolutely right about one thing. She blinked, surprised at agreement from an unexpected quarter. Breeding shows, I continued. And you've shown everyone here exactly what yours is worth. Her face went rigid. Excuse me, you've spent 3 years telling me I'm not good enough for your daughter, that I'm beneath this family, that I'm, what was it tonight, from humble beginnings, comfortable with working-class situations. I picked up my water glass, taking a slow sip. You've made assumptions based on my truck, my clothes, the neighborhoods where I work. You've judged an entire human being based on superficial markers of wealth. I've judged you on your ability to provide for my daughter, Margaret snapped. On your prospects, your breeding, my tax returns, I offered, because I've got those, or maybe we could discuss my investment portfolio. Current valuation sits around 11 million, give or take, depending on the market. But I suppose that's not the right sort of money, is it? Not old money, not family money, just the money someone from my background manages to scrape together through hard work and smart decisions. The silence was total now, broken only by the faint tick of the antique clock in the hall. Claire's mouth had fallen open. Judith's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. Margaret's face had gone the color of the duck on her plate. That's absurd. You drive a truck I paid cash for because I don't believe in car payments, I finished. I wear what's comfortable because I don't need designer labels to feel secure. I work in tough neighborhoods because that's where people need quality housing they can afford, and because I remember what it's like to wonder if your family will make rent. Constance had set down her fork entirely, her expression caught between shock and something that might have been embarrassment. But you want to know the really funny thing? I continued, my voice still calm, almost conversational. The thing that's kept me smiling through 3 years of your insults and implications. Margaret's hands were trembling now, her rings catching the chandelier light. I own the Thornwood estate. For a moment nobody moved. The words seemed to hang in the air like smoke, dissipating slowly into understanding. Then Judith gasped, an audible intake of breath that broke the spell. The Thornwood estate, Robert leaned forward. The Gothic revival on Thurman, that Thornwood, that's impossible, Margaret whispered. That property sold to some development company, the attorney told me. Blue Summit Properties, LLC, I confirmed. That's mine, has been for 6 months. I bought it in probate, paid cash, and spent the last half year restoring it to period accuracy. New roof, all mechanicals updated to code, gardens restored by the same landscape architect who did the Japanese garden downtown. There's a library now with floor-to-ceiling walnut shelves. The kitchen has professional-grade appliances because I know how much you value cooking. Margaret's face had gone from red to white, a pallor that made her makeup stand out like stage paint. You bought the house you've wanted for 20 years, I said gently. The one you drove past every week, the one you called a real house and what success looks like. The one you told Claire represented everything a family should aspire to. Claire was staring at me, tears streaming silently down her face. Daniel, you never said. I wanted it to be a surprise, I told her, my voice softening. I was going to tell you on our anniversary next month. The deed's in both our names as of last week. It's ours, Claire, really ours, I thought. I turned back to Margaret. I thought I'd restore it first, make it perfect, prove that someone from my background could be trusted with something that precious. That I could honor history and craftsmanship and legacy, even though I learned about houses by framing walls and laying tile, not from some family tradition. How much? Todd blurted out. What you pay? 3.2 million, I said, then another 800,000 in renovations, but it's worth more than that now. The appraisal came in last week at 5.1. Constance had gone very still, her expression unreadable. Marcus, still standing in the doorway, let out a low whistle. You spent $4 million, Margaret said slowly, each word measured, on a house. While letting me believe you could barely afford, I didn't let you believe anything, I interrupted, and now there was steel in my voice. You chose to believe I was poor because I didn't perform wealth the way you expected. You chose to insult me, to demean my work, to tell your daughter she'd settled. You chose every word, every implication, every dismissive comment. I just chose not to correct you." "That's manipulative," Constance said, finding her voice. "Leading someone on like that, letting them embarrass themselves, is it?" Claire cut in, and her voice was shaking but firm. "Is it manipulative to not brag about money, to live modestly and work hard without announcing your bank balance? Or is it manipulative to judge someone's worth by their car and clothes, to spend years tearing them down because they don't meet some arbitrary standard of presentation?" Judith reached across the table, taking Margaret's hand. "Maggie, maybe." But Margaret yanked her hand away, standing so abruptly her chair scraped against the hardwood. "This is a game to you," she said, pointing at me with a trembling finger. "Some elaborate revenge for perceived slights. You've humiliated me in front of my family, my oldest friend." "I stated facts," I said quietly. "If you feel humiliated, maybe ask yourself why truth feels like an attack. You know what you are," and there it was, the moment I'd been waiting for without knowing I'd been waiting. Margaret's face twisted, all pretense of civility abandoned. "You're poor trash who got lucky, trash who stumbled into money and thinks that makes him worthy of my daughter, of this family. But money doesn't change breeding, Daniel. It doesn't change what you are underneath." "Enough." Claire slammed her hand on the table, making the crystal jump. She stood, facing her mother, and I saw in her expression something I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, but a kind of clarity that burned away everything else. "You're done. Do you understand me? You are done talking about my husband that way." "Claire, sweetheart, I'm just trying to protect. Protect me from what? From a man who worked his way up from nothing and never once made that my problem. From someone who respects my choices and supports my dreams. From a partner who spent months secretly restoring a house because he knew it would make me happy, because he pays attention and cares and gives without keeping score." Claire's voice broke, but she pushed through. "Dad would be ashamed of you. You've spent 3 years using his memory as a weapon, as if grief gave you permission to be cruel. But Dad was kind. He judged people by their actions, not their bank accounts. And Daniel has shown more character in 3 years than you've shown in my entire life." Margaret's face crumpled. For a moment she looked very old, very small, standing there in her emerald silk with her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. "I thought I was protecting you," she whispered. "After your father died, all I wanted was to keep you safe, to make sure you had security." "I am safe," Claire said, her voice gentler now but no less firm. "I have security. I have a partner who sees me, who chooses me every day, who doesn't need to prove anything to anyone, and I have a choice to make right now." She turned to me, wiping her eyes, and held out her hand. I took it, standing, feeling the weight of 11 pairs of eyes on us. "We're leaving," Claire said, "and we're not coming back until Mom is ready to apologize, not to explain, not to justify, to actually apologize and mean it, to Daniel for 3 years of insults. To me, for trying to control my life, and to herself for letting fear and snobbery turn her into someone Dad wouldn't recognize." We walked toward the door, the dining room silent behind us. Marcus stepped aside, giving us a small nod that might have been respect. As we reached the foyer, Judith's voice called out, "Claire, wait." She appeared in the doorway, wringing her hands. "Your mother, she's been struggling. The house, the finances, she's proud, you know she is, and admitting she needs help." "I know," Claire said softly. "But that doesn't excuse cruelty, and it doesn't make it my job to absorb her fear and let it poison my marriage." We stepped out into the November night, the air crisp and clean after the hothouse tension of the dining room. Claire leaned against me, shaking, and I wrapped my arms around her. "I'm sorry," I murmured. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you about the house. I wanted it to be perfect, wanted to surprise you." "Don't," she said, looking up at me. "Don't apologize for giving us a home. Don't apologize for having boundaries, and definitely don't apologize for finally defending yourself against someone who's been beating you down for years." We stood there for a long moment, breathing together, letting the adrenaline ebb. Then Claire laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "We own the Thornwood estate." "We own it, that ridiculous, beautiful, Gothic nightmare of a house." "We do," I confirmed, "and it needs a name plaque and furniture, and for you to decide what color to paint the morning room. Also, the third-floor bathroom has this incredible clawfoot tub I had restored, and I've been dying to show you." She kissed me, stopping the words, her hands framing my face. "Take me home," she said, "to our home." The one we built together, not the one my mother wanted for us. I want to see our house, Daniel. I want to stand in that library and know we earned it together through your work and my support in our life, not through her approval or anyone else's. Best idea I've heard all night, I said, opening the truck door for her. As we pulled away from the curb, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The Victorian house glowed with warm light, and in the dining room window I could see figures moving, conversations surely exploding in our wake. Margaret stood on the front steps, silhouetted against the doorway, watching us go. I thought about calling back, about offering some final word. But there was nothing left to say. Some bridges you burn, some you just stop crossing. The Thornwood estate sat on its hillside like a dream carved from stone and timber. I'd arranged for the property manager to leave lights on, and as we wound up the private drive, the house revealed itself in stages. First the iron gates with their scrollwork vines, then the curve of the driveway through old-growth oaks, finally the house itself with its towers and gables and stained glass windows glowing like jewels. Claire went very quiet. Her hand found mine across the console, gripping tight. "Daniel," she breathed, "it's you actually." I parked in the circular drive. There was a detached garage for 6 cars, but I wanted her to see the entrance properly and came around to open her door. She stepped out slowly, staring up at the facade, at the intricate woodwork and the widow's walk where legend said the original Mrs. Thornwood had watched for ships in the distant river. "You hate it," I said, a joke, but she whirled on me. "I love it. I love you. I love that you saw something my mother wanted and made it ours. I love that you spent months working on it without telling me, keeping this impossible secret, and I love that you revealed it like that, in the moment she needed humbling most." She laughed, wiping fresh tears. "I love that I married someone who fights back not with cruelty but with competence, who proves himself through actions, not words." "I hope you also love Victorian-era plumbing quirks," I said, pulling out the key, an actual iron skeleton key for the original front door, because I was sentimental like that. Because the guest bathroom has this drain situation that's basically a physics puzzle. The interior smelled of lemon oil and fresh paint, the scent of care and restoration. I'd had the heat turned on that morning, anticipating this moment even though I hadn't known exactly when it would come. The foyer opened into a grand staircase of carved walnut, the original newel posts topped with carved acorns. The floors were oak, restored to a honey glow. To the left, pocket doors revealed the parlor with its bay window seat and original fireplace. To the right, the library that had consumed 2 months of my life. Claire walked into the library like entering a cathedral. Floor-to-ceiling walnut shelves lined 3 walls, all custom-built to match the 1890s style. The 4th wall was dominated by a stone fireplace with an oak mantel carved with oak leaves and acorns, the same motif that appeared throughout the house. Above the mantel, I'd hung a photograph of her father in a simple frame. She froze when she saw it. "That's Dad." "That's from his college graduation. You had a copy in your memory box," I said quietly. "I asked your Aunt Judith to scan it for me last month. I thought, he should be here. This house is about family, about legacy. He's part of that." Claire pressed her hands to her mouth, shoulders shaking. I crossed to her, wrapping her in my arms, letting her cry against my chest. Outside, Portland's city lights spread below us like a carpet of stars. "He would have liked you," she said eventually, her voice muffled. "So much. He would have seen exactly what you are." "What's that?" "Good, simple, direct, just fundamentally good." We spent the next hour wandering room by room. I showed her the kitchen with its 8-burner Wolf range and marble countertops, the morning room with windows on 3 sides overlooking the gardens, the dining room that could seat 20 with its chandelier salvaged from an estate sale in Seattle. Upstairs, 5 bedrooms, each with its own character. The rose room with its original wallpaper painstakingly restored, the blue room with its window seat overlooking Mount Hood, the master suite with its sitting area and that clawfoot tub in an ensuite bathroom the size of our current apartment's living room. "We're going to get lost in here," Claire said, laughing. "We're going to need a map and a staff and possibly a search party when one of us goes missing in the basement." "There's a wine cellar," I admitted, "and a root cellar. And what might have been a speakeasy during Prohibition." The inspector found a false wall. "Of course there's a speakeasy." She spun in the master bedroom, arms wide. "We live in a house with a speakeasy. This is insane." "It's ours," I corrected. "Insane and ours." We ended up in the window seat of the blue room, overlooking the city, sharing a bottle of water I'd left in the fridge and talking in a way we hadn't talked in months, without the weight of Margaret's disapproval, without the careful navigation of family politics. Just us and the house and the future spreading out like the lights below. "She'll come around," Claire said eventually. "Or she won't, but either way we're okay, better than okay. You don't think I went too far?" I'd been wondering that since we left, replaying the moment. "The reveal, the timing, you stood up for yourself," Claire interrupted. "You stated facts. If she can't handle the truth of who you are, that's her problem to solve, not yours to manage." A text buzzed my phone, then another. I glanced at the screen, Judith asking if we were all right. Then Marcus, surprisingly, with a thumbs-up emoji and the words, "That was epic, dude." Then, unexpectedly, "Robert, your mother-in-law is having a moment. Judith thinks she might be ready to talk. No pressure, but wanted you to know." I showed Claire. She read it, chewing her lip. "Do you want to talk to her? Do you?" She thought about it, really thought, staring out at the city. "Not tonight. Tonight is ours. Tomorrow, maybe, or next week. Whenever we're ready, not when she decides she's ready to rug sweep and move on without actually changing." I sent back a simple reply, "Thanks for letting us know. We need some time. We'll reach out when we're ready." Claire's phone started ringing, Margaret probably, and she declined the call, then silenced it entirely. "I love her," she said quietly, "but I love you more, and I love myself enough not to accept being collateral damage in her fear." We sat there until the city lights blurred with exhaustion, until the house settled around us with creaks and sighs, learning our presence. At some point, Claire fell asleep against my shoulder, and I just held her, breathing in the scent of old wood and new paint and possibility. This house had been built by a timber baron in 1892, raised a family through 2 world wars and the Depression, survived earthquakes and time. It had seen love and loss, joy and grief, generations of living. Now it was ours to fill with our own story, one built not on performance or pretense, but on the solid foundation of respect and partnership and the quiet radical act of choosing each other, again and again. 3 weeks later, we hosted our own Thanksgiving. Not at the Thornwood, that felt premature, the house still too new, too unfinished, but at our apartment, cramped and warm and smelling of roasting turkey and Claire's experimental pumpkin tart. We invited Marcus and his girlfriend, Robert and Judith, and 2 of Claire's college friends who'd been frozen out of previous holidays because they didn't dress appropriately, Judith's apologetic explanation. Margaret we did not invite, not out of spite, but out of necessity. She'd texted daily, called twice, even sent a handwritten letter that Claire had read in silence before filing it away. The letter was an explanation, not an apology, a detailed account of her financial stress, her fear of losing face, her complicated grief. All true, probably, none of it an excuse. "She wants forgiveness without change," Claire had said after reading it. "She wants me to understand why she did it, so I'll accept it happening again. That's not how this works." So Thanksgiving was loud with different voices, crowded with people who brought wine and genuine laughter, who asked about the house restoration and actually listened to the answers. Marcus turned out to be excellent at carving turkey despite claiming he'd never done it. Judith got tipsy on Prosecco and told stories about teenage Margaret that made Claire snort wine through her nose. Robert pulled me aside at one point, clasping my shoulder. "What you did," he said quietly, "at that dinner, that took restraint and courage." Margaret needed to hear it, even if she's not ready to accept it yet. "I didn't do it to hurt her," I said, and meant it. "I did it to stop being hurt. I know, and that's the difference." The following Monday, I got a call from Constance. That surprised me. I'd written her off entirely after the dinner, assumed she'd sided completely with Margaret in whatever narrative was being constructed. "Daniel," she said without preamble, "I owe you an apology, several actually. May I buy you coffee?" We met at a downtown cafe, all exposed brick and Edison bulbs. Constance arrived in her usual armor of designer clothing and careful makeup, but she looked tired underneath it. "I've been thinking about that dinner," she began after we'd ordered. "About what I said, what I implied. About breeding and quality and all that aristocratic nonsense. It wasn't nonsense to you when you said it." "No," she admitted. "It wasn't, but it should have been." She stirred her cappuccino unnecessarily. "My husband's family had money, had past tense. They lost most of it in 2008, made bad investments, refused to adapt, were maintaining appearances with credit and fumes. Meanwhile, you, someone my circle would have dismissed as beneath notice, built something real through actual work. Why tell me this? Because Margaret is my oldest friend and I've been enabling her worst impulses for years, validating her snobbery because it made my own feel justified. But you were right about breeding showing, about character mattering. She looked at me directly for the first time. You showed more grace under fire than I've seen in most so-called society circles, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I didn't know what to do with this unexpected crack in the facade. Okay, I said finally. Thank you for telling me. Margaret's struggling, Constance continued. Really struggling. The house, the money, she took out that reverse mortgage thinking she'd work until 70, but her health is declining. She's terrified of losing everything, of becoming what she accused you of being. That doesn't excuse, I know. I'm not asking you to forgive her or accept her back. I'm asking you to understand that fear makes people ugly. And that maybe, if she ever does the actual work of apologizing, really apologizing without conditions, you might consider listening. I thought about that walk from Margaret's dining room, the feeling of Claire's hand in mine, about boundaries being less about walls and more about doors you could choose to open. If she apologizes, I said carefully, we'll listen. But Claire gets to decide the terms of any relationship, not Margaret, and I won't accept being treated as lesser ever again by anyone. That's non-negotiable. Constance nodded slowly. Fair enough. We finished our coffee talking about the house, about restoration challenges and historical accuracy, and it was surprisingly pleasant. She knew architecture, it turned out, had a degree in art history herself. We weren't friends, wouldn't be, but we were two people having a real conversation instead of performing status. It was something. December brought the first snow, unusual for Portland, and the Thornwood looked like a postcard under its white blanket. We moved in on a Saturday with help from Marcus and friends, our collection of mismatched furniture looking lost in the vast rooms. Claire immediately started planning, paint colors, furniture arrangements, a timeline for actually furnishing a house that could swallow our current possessions 3 times over. I want to host Christmas, she announced one evening. We were in the library, her curled in a chair by the fire while I assembled a bookshelf. Not just us, everyone, your family, my extended family, your friends from work. I want this house full of people who chose to be here. Your mom, she considered it. If she wants to come, she can ask, properly. But I'm not extending an invitation just to smooth things over. Margaret didn't ask. Christmas came with a card, a generic department store card, Happy Holidays in gold script and nothing else. Claire cried when it arrived, not from sadness but from the finality of it. Her mother, faced with the choice between pride and relationship, had chosen pride, but the house was full anyway. My parents drove up from the apartment they'd retired to in Eugene, my mother gasping at the restored kitchen, my father quietly examining the woodwork with the eye of someone who understood craftsmanship. Claire's college friends came, and coworkers from the gallery, and Judith's family, and people I knew from the Portland real estate investment community. We roasted a ham and a turkey, Claire made 3 kinds of pie, and someone started a piano carol sing-along in the front parlor using the restored upright I'd found at an estate sale. At one point I found myself in the kitchen with my mother, washing dishes while laughter spilled in from the other rooms. You did good, she said quietly. Not just the house, though this place is something else, but the life, the person you married. The way you handled all that ugliness with grace. I wanted to fight back, I admitted. So many times I wanted to just explode and list everything I'd accomplished, prove I was worthy, but you didn't, she interrupted. You lived your life and let the truth speak when it needed to. That's not weakness, Majito, that's strength. After everyone left, after the house fell quiet except for the settling sounds of old bones and new memories, Claire and I stood in the library looking at her father's photograph above the mantel. He would have liked this, she said. Not the size or the prestige or whatever, just the fullness, the life being lived here. Your mom could still be part of it, I offered. Doors not locked, I know, but she has to choose to walk through it. I can't drag her. Spring brought the official housewarming party, a June afternoon when we opened the gardens to friends and family, served food from the professional kitchen, let people wander the restored rooms. Constance came, bringing her husband, and spent an hour discussing the stained glass with an expert who'd helped with the restoration. Marcus brought a new girlfriend who was studying architecture. Judith and Robert arrived with a hand-carved wooden sign for the front entrance, Whitmore Chen House, merging our surnames in letters carved by a local artist. Margaret did not come, but she sent a package, no card, just our names on the label. Inside, wrapped in tissue, was a quilt. Hand-stitched, the pattern something traditional, made from fabrics Claire recognized as coming from her childhood dresses and her father's old shirts. It would have taken months to make, hours of painstaking work. Claire held it, tears streaming silently. "It's her apology," she whispered. Or the closest she can get. She doesn't know how to say the words, so she stitched them. Is it enough? She thought about it, really thought, holding the quilt to her chest. It's a start, but it's not finished yet. She needs to be able to say it out loud, to acknowledge what she did without deflection. This is better than silence, but it's not enough to just show up in my life again like nothing happened. We draped the quilt over the reading chair in the library, a splash of color against the walnut and leather. A promise, maybe, or a question waiting for an answer. The following week, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Daniel," the voice was older, uncertain. "It's Margaret. I wonder if... could I take you to lunch? Just us. I'd like to talk." I looked at Claire across the breakfast table. She raised her eyebrows, a question. I covered the phone. "Your mom wants to have lunch? Just me. Do you want to?" Did I? Part of me wanted to refuse, to hold the boundary firm. But another part, the part that had spent months restoring a house because I believed in foundations and structure and the possibility of rebuilding, was curious. "I'll go," I told Margaret, "but I choose the place and I'm not promising anything except to listen." "That's fair," she said quietly. "That's more than fair." We met at a diner in Southeast Portland, the kind of place with vinyl booths and bottomless coffee, worlds away from her usual haunts. She looked smaller than I remembered, older, wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of her usual designer armor. "Thank you for coming," she said after we'd ordered. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I would either." She fiddled with her coffee cup, not meeting my eyes. "I owe you an apology, a real one, not an explanation or a justification. What I said at that dinner, what I said before that, all of it was wrong. It was cruel and snobbish and..." She swallowed hard. "It was everything my late husband would have been ashamed of." "Why did you do it?" I asked quietly. "Really? Beyond the fear and the money troubles, why did you need to make me feel small?" She was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Because I felt small. After David died, I held onto appearances like a life raft. The house, the social circle, the standards, they were all I had. And then Claire brought home someone who didn't fit the picture I'd built, who threatened the story I was telling myself. If you could be worthy without the markers I'd spent my life valuing, what did that say about my choices? So you tried to cut me down to size." "Yes, and it was horrible, and I'm sorry. Claire won't return my calls, and I understand why. But I needed you to hear me say it. I was wrong. About you, about what matters, about everything. You're a good man, Daniel. You've been good to my daughter, good to this family, and I repaid that with nothing but contempt." The apology sat between us, heavy and hard one. I could feel the weight of it, the cost to her pride. "I appreciate you saying that," I said finally, "and I accept your apology for how you treated me, but Claire, that's her call. She gets to decide what comes next, and I won't push her either direction." "I know," Margaret wiped her eyes. "I just wanted you to know and to say, the house, Thornwood, the quilt pattern was inspired by the gardens there. I used to walk past it and dream. When I heard you'd bought it, I was furious. Then I was ashamed. Then I was just sad because you gave Claire what I never could, security without conditions, home without strings, love that didn't come with a ledger." We finished lunch talking carefully, like two people learning a new language. She asked about the restoration, and I told her about the speakeasy, the widow's walk, the third-floor bathroom. She told me about her childhood, about her own parents' expectations, about learning too late that performance wasn't the same as presence. When we parted, we didn't hug, but we shook hands, and it felt like something, not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement, the beginning of a foundation. 2 years later, on a September afternoon warm with Indian summer, we gathered in the Thornwood Gardens for another celebration. Claire and I had spent the morning arranging chairs beneath the old oak trees, stringing lights that would glow come evening. The occasion, her mother's birthday, the first family gathering Margaret had attended since the infamous dinner. It had been a slow rebuilding. Months of family therapy, of careful conversations, of boundaries maintained and occasionally tested. Margaret had sold her West Hills house, downsizing to a condo closer to downtown. She'd apologized to Claire, really apologized, and slowly, so slowly earned her way back into our lives. She arrived early by request and I met her at the door. She held a bakery box and her hands trembled slightly. "I made something," she said. "Well, supervised the making. My carpal tunnel isn't what it used to be, but it's David's recipe, his favorite cake. Inside, a lemon cake with raspberry filling, the same cake Claire remembered from childhood birthdays before her father died. She'll love it," I said. "Thank you for bringing it." "Thank you for having me," Margaret replied and meant it. The party filled with people throughout the afternoon: Judith's family, my parents, friends from work and school, Constance with her husband looking relaxed in retirement. Marcus showed up with yet another girlfriend, this one apparently sticking. Children ran through the gardens, voices echoing off the house's stone walls. Someone started a croquet game that devolved into cheerful chaos. At one point, I found Claire and her mother in the library, sitting on either end of the quilt-covered chair, looking at photograph albums. Not talking, just being together, sharing space. "Thank you," Margaret said quietly when she noticed me in the doorway, "for not giving up on me, for letting me find my way back." "You did the work," I said. "All I did was hold the door open." As the sun set and the string lights came on, turning the gardens into something magical, Claire found me by the fountain. She'd changed into a summer dress and her hair caught the light like copper. "Happy?" I asked, pulling her close, ridiculously. She looked up at the house, our house, this impossible Gothic dream we'd filled with life and laughter and the messy, beautiful work of building family. "You know what the best part is?" "What's that?" "We did this. Not through inheritance or luck or playing by someone else's rules. We built this life through work and love and choosing each other every single day. That's the real foundation. The house is just the structure that holds it." From the gardens, someone called for cake. Margaret's laugh rang out lighter than I'd ever heard it. The party moved toward the house, a river of people and conversation and belonging. Claire took my hand. "Come on, let's go have some cake." We walked together toward the light and the laughter, toward the family we'd built and rebuilt and chosen, toward the life we'd made in this house that had once represented everything we weren't supposed to have. But we had it anyway because we'd worked for it, earned it, and proved that worth isn't measured in appearances or bloodlines but in the quiet courage of showing up, speaking truth, and loving without conditions. The Thornwood estate stood behind us, solid and enduring, a testament to the fact that the strongest foundations are built not from what you inherit, but from what you choose to create.